Hello, my name is Chris with Boise State University. Today I'll be presenting my research topic, and the title of my publication is The Cost of Serving Sexual Assault in America's Military. Today, right now, a female serving in the United States military is far more likely to be victimized by a fellow service member than to be injured in combat in Iraq or Afghanistan. Now, sexual assault is not a new phenomenon within the United States military. In fact, data exists all the way back to Vietnam on the frequency of sexual victimization amongst veterans. It's so prevalent actually that in 2005, the Department of Defense instituted the Sexual Assault Response and Prevention Organization. Now, the purpose of this organization was to completely eliminate sexual assault within the United States military. The subordinate departments, the departments of the Army, Air Force, and Navy, all followed suit and implemented their own sexual assault response and prevention programs. It's quite obvious, though, that they've all fallen short on their goals of eliminating sexual assault within the military. My research is going to focus on factors within the United States military specifically that contribute to the high rate of sexual assault and sexual harassment. Specifically, why the DoD has been unable to reduce the frequency of sexual victimization within the military. The research on this topic is extensive and, like I said, dates all the way back to the Vietnam era. A few of the more prevalent articles and journals I will be using. One by Bell and Reardon. The title is Experiences of Sexual Harassment and Sexual Assault in the Military Amongst OEF and OIF Veterans. And this was a survey of both male and female service members that had recently returned from the global war on terror. Out of all the participants in this survey, 60% of the females and 27% of the males had experienced sexual harassment while serving overseas in Iraq or Afghanistan. Even more alarming than that, 9% of the females had been the victim of a sexual assault while overseas. Now, we're using the American Medical Association's definition of sexual assault and sexual harassment. Sexual assault is actually completed or an attempted rape. Any groping, any physical contact at all is classified as a sexual assault. Sexual harassment is any verbal or nonverbal action of a sexual nature. It's been found that sexual assault and sexual harassment victims also have a high correlation of PTSD. They suffer from symptoms such as depression, substance abuse, eating disorders, personality disorders. They have a tough time coping once they return to civilian life because of the value structure within the United States military. They teach a structure of loyalty, duty, courage, integrity, and they feel that what they've known within that military that has been violated. So they have a really tough time coming out in the civilian sector and even to military health professionals and telling them about this experience that happened to them. Another very prevalent article I'm using is by Ellison. It's called The Military Secret Shame, and it was actually published in the New York Times. In 2010, the Department of Veterans Affairs reported that it had 50,000 male veterans that screened positive for military sexual trauma. That's a 60% increase from 2003 figures. Usually, male-on-male sexual assaults within the military, it's not a homosexual thing. It's about power and intimidation. More of a prison setting, an all-male environment, and they've got to establish the alpha male, and sexual assaults are actually quite common amongst males. Previously, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the policy that has recently been lifted, would actually punish victims of sexual assault, male victims. They would report the sexual assault and then be labeled as a homosexual and forced to discharge under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. Another prevalent article is Factors Associated with Women's Risk of Rape in the Military, and that's by Sadler and Booth. It was a longitudinal study of 640 participants. They were all female, obviously. 80% of the participants experienced some form of sexual harassment while serving in the military, and 30% experienced either a completed or attempted sexual assault. This article lists several characteristics of not only victims but also offenders. The typical victim of sexual assault within the military is obviously female. They typically entered the military at a very young age and were discharged at a young age. They're lower in rank, lower enlisted, privates, airmen, sailors, and they typically don't have a college degree. The offenders are obviously predominantly male, and they're usually of a higher rank than the victim, so they have some influence and power over their victims. Sadler and Booth also state that the number one contributing factor to sexual assault within the military is supervisors that either encourage, initiate, or ignore sexual harassment in the workplace, which tends to lead to a high rate of sexual assault. The most prevalent article that I used was actually by Turchik and Wilson, and it's called Sexual Assault in the U.S. Military, a review of literature and recommendations for the future. They talk about previous UCMJ, which is the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Previous laws within the UCMJ would actually scare victims away from reporting a sexual assault. They often would fear that their career would be in jeopardy, or that their chain of command just simply wouldn't believe them and would swipe the case underneath the rug. So therefore there's an extreme underestimate in the actual frequency of sexual victimization that occurs within the military, and there still is today because there's a lot of pressure on these victims as far as in the workplace and workplace tensions once they report a sexual assault or a sexual harassment. Turchik and Wilson also list several factors within the military culture that actually promote sexual victimization, such as hypermasculinity, being praised for violence, and alcoholism, which is quite common amongst service members. Turchik and Wilson go on to list several recommendations for the future and how the Department of Defense could reduce sexual assaults within the military, including educating victims, educating all service members on the proper procedures for reporting a sexual victimization, and holding leaders accountable for the actions of their service members. The importance of this research can be seen every day in the media, especially. Just recently at West Point, the Army's military academy, a member of the cadre was charged with sexual assault. He was actually going into the female shower room with his camera phone and taking pictures of the female cadets. By the time he was caught, he had several files on his personal computer of naked female cadets in the shower. This has actually spurred Congress to take action, and Congress is in the process right now of overhauling the way that the Department of Defense deals with sexual assaults and sexual harassments. They're taking a lot of the discretion that military commanders have away and enforcing zero tolerance policies throughout the military. The military could be considered a microcosm of society in whole, in that it encompasses all different races, religions, genders, nationalities that you would find anywhere in the country in very confined spaces. So if the Department of Defense is able to implement a solution that effectively reduces sexual victimization, that could be applied to college campuses all across the nation, which also have a high rate of sexual victimization. In closing, this is a very important topic that definitely needs more research conducted, and I hope that I can contribute in some way. Thank you for watching.